How y'all doing today? Okay. These
Y'all
are not
look
mocktails, by the way.
They're not, and they're good.
Yes, they are very, very tasty. So, gosh, how long have we known each other now, DJ?
Ooh, I think I first met you in 2017. I want to say I'm late to Sisterhood, y'all, but Sisterhood is like second to Mommyhood is the best hood.
Ooh.
It's fabulous. So we met in 2017 at the NAACP Awards.
Yep.
And I was so excited because I've been watching her show with my husband, and I was about to flex on my husband like, I just met Jemele Hill. And I loved just who she was, and I just let her know right then and there.
This is true. And I remember at the time, I don't know what season of Greenleaf you were in, but so at the time when I met DJ, I was at ESPN and I was hosting SportsCenter. And my entire show staff, which was primarily black, was all in on Greenleaf. So like the day after an episode, they need their Greenleaf time before the production. Did you see what Charity did? And blah, blah, blah. And all this. And I got jealous. I was like, I need to get in on it. So I started binge watching it. So I was in the middle of binging it when I saw you and your co-star Merle. And I was like, oh my God, and she's from the D. I was like, we about to have a whole Detroit moment, up in here. So, it was great because her family's a legacy family in Detroit. They're royalty in my city. And aside from that part of it, I respected her talent. I love to see Detroit people doing well. But I think when we got to know each other is when I ran into you at Soho House. Yep. Yes.
Absolutely. Soho House. I was there with someone else, and I spotted Jemele, and I said, oh my God, it's Jemele Hill. And she was like, oh, do you want me to introduce you? I was like, well, I know her. And this was the test for me, because we met at an award show, and we in Hollywood, so you
Folks
don't
get
know
to acting funny.
how finicky people gonna be.
Right.
And but she was from the D, so I had hope. And when I went to her at the bar, she was like, yo, what up? I was like, oh my God, this is my people. So we exchanged information there, and I'm just all about, like, it's too stressful to try to force a relationship. I can't do that. I also, like, my face is gonna tell it all. So if and so we really just began to bond and had a real relationship, and I fell in love with Jemele because she is honest. She's real. There's no pretense. And I've learned so much. I've learned so much from you, my G. Like, just being able to be my full self, not feeling judged, not feeling like, oh, I know your family, and I know where you come from, and why you acting like this, and why would you say that? I got to just be me. And I got to be held in a safe space. I got to be loved. I got to be like, girl, what you doing? You better pull back. What is that? I got all of the realness, and that is, to me, a honest relationship, a real relationship, something that I wanted to continue to nurture. And that's why I admire you so much. I also learned that no is a full and complete sentence. No, yeah.
No, it is, because I think we, as women, sometimes we make a slight mistake in that. I know that Drake coined the phrase "no new friends," and I know some of us sit in that space after a while, because a lot of us have our childhood friends, our high school friends, our college friends, or friends we met professionally, and there's this cutoff that happens in our mind. We're like, nope, no new friends, ain't letting nobody else in. And what I loved about our friendship, it developed so organically. The play dates organized themselves, right? And so we kept seeing each other at events. We'd exchanged information. Then we wound up living close to each other when you were at Argyle House. And because when I first met DJ, I wasn't even living in Los Angeles then. And then he was my boyfriend then, me and my husband, we moved to Los Angeles in 2018. They live right by us. And so we just started all hanging out. And what's even harder to find is not only when you have women who get along, but when their husbands get along. And so our husbands, they got their own play date, they do their own thing, and we all hang out as a couple in the group. But what I did love about DJ is that not only was she authentic and real and comfortable in who she was, she also had just this like really infectious spirit. And positivity is important to me, vibe is important to me. And you know, one thing about you is that your vibe is always just so strongly positive, and it just sucks me right in all the time. And you know, you keep it real too. Like, you just use less cuss words than I do, but you keep it with the same amount of realness. And I appreciate that, because it is hard to find people who keep it real, but not in a way that I feel like is harmful. Because there are people that say, like, I practice brutal honesty, but brutal honesty in a way that's cruel. Because you can be honest with somebody and you don't always have to purposely hurt their feelings or purposely say mean and nasty things. And obviously, you know, you have never been that way. And so I just appreciated developing such a strong friendship at this stage in my life with somebody who's real and somebody who's also from the city and doing us proud. And I don't know, Detroiters, we just have like kind of a way with each other.
We do.
Yeah, so we understand the struggles of our city. The identities are just strongly fused within us. So like we had so much in common, and all the differences were great because it allowed for an opportunity to learn. So I have equally learned as much from you as well about not just authenticity, but about how to go against the grain in a way that doesn't deplete me, right? Because you are very good at that, which we're going to talk about in our conversations. We have some lovely questions here that we will go over. So I'll get to the first one here. Have you always trusted your voice?
Ooh, have I always trusted my voice? No. Yes and no. So growing up, I always knew I wanted to act. I was never in love with singing. That was never a thing for me. I was super supportive of my family. Look, if you're doing something and you my people, I'm going to cheer for you like there's no tomorrow. But it just wasn't my love. And acting to my family did not seem like a way to really serve God. Growing up, how they grew up, it was just very conservative. And I remember saying I wanted to major in theater in college, and my granddaddy said, "Ain't that Broadway? Broadway's the way to hell. The way to God is narrow." I was like, Jesus, am I gonna make it? So to that extent, like I trusted my voice knowing that I feel like this is really what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. But privately, it was very hard. I felt like my family wasn't going to be as proud of me as I was of them, and that they weren't going to be able to support me in a way that I wanted to be supported. So it was very difficult. I questioned myself a lot just privately. But I knew like this was the only hunger and passion that I had. And so I had to follow it. So trusting it, not all the time, but just going ahead and doing it, even though I didn't always trust it, that's what I did.
So you just went, you just basically said, okay, I know I have this self-doubt. I'm just going to go forward anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think it was hard because I love my family. I've always been a family girl, and I love the Lord. And so feeling like my love for God was in question because of what I felt like God had given me to do was very difficult. But then, you know, as you get older, you realize God gives you your dreams, your passions, and everybody may not see it, and that's okay. They'll see it eventually. And so, yeah, it was difficult.
Or even if they don't see it, you still got the gift. It doesn't really matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me throughout the years, like, oh, when did you know you had this voice? And I'm like, I don't know, because it has always sort of naturally been there. Really? But that doesn't mean like as a kid I was super vocal and I was just the one like, fight the powers that be. No, that wasn't me. But I think my sense of voice came from my mother. Seeing the women in your family have that same sense of voice, it just naturally, organically, through osmosis, you just sort of learn, like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is who I'm supposed to be. I'm always supposed to advocate for myself. I'm always supposed to stand up for myself. If I don't like something or I feel like something is wrong, it's okay to say something. Now, lived experience helps. There are battles I never would pick at 22 that I would gladly pick at 42 and cuss you all the way out. But I couldn't do that at 22 because you have to be very strategic about how you move and how you navigate. So I think being in legacy corporate media taught me about leverage. It taught me about how to politically align myself within that company. Because as much as black people get told, like, just hold your head down, go to work, do what you got to do. You got to play the strategic game. Yeah. You have to, if I may keep it all the way real, you got to play that same game that white men play. Absolutely. You got to learn how to do that. But learn how to do it in a way that doesn't compromise your integrity, doesn't compromise the things that you stand for. But you know that you have to create allyships and partnerships, sponsorships, all those things at work. And so I think having a 20-plus year media career taught me how to use my voice differently in different situations and to be strategic about how I did it. You know, when I got to ESPN, the voice I had then was mainly about the opinions I expressed from a sports standpoint. But then as I got deeper into television and into broadcasting and saw the stuff happening behind the scenes, as my platform grew, I considered it my responsibility to use that to advocate for others, to make sure that when I left, that room did not look the same. You know, there was a reason on our staff at SportsCenter that we had a mostly black staff. That was something that was intentional. And we used our leverage and our platform, our positions in the company to make that happen. So that it was a part of developing my voice as well.
So did you ever feel like it was difficult for you to kind of go against the grain and create the space that you wanted to create for yourself?
Hell yeah. It was very difficult, because especially when you're in the business of giving your opinions, that means that you're gonna have a segment of people that always hate you, that can't stand what you're doing, and you know, it's the good thing and the bad thing is that I've been so accustomed to, you know, receiving like racist hate mail and all that kind of stuff. That's been happening like since I was in college. And so by the time I got to a point where it was like the volume of it was intense, it's like, yeah, I already dealt with it, but it's just like back then they would send you snail mail. Now it's like they tweet you or they send you Facebook, but I was like, I'm sort of, unfortunately, accustomed to this. But what I had to understand was even that stuff, as much as I could deal with it, it still infects your spirit. And I had to learn like, how can I manage this so that I could keep my, you know, sort of Tupac attitude about it, but at the same time not let this really infect who I am. And so that was difficult, you know, and especially when sort of the height of the infamy that I had came along in 2017, I had to really, I was lucky that I had such a supportive tribe around me so that I was able to ward off, you know, some of the negative complications that came with that. But it's not easy to use your voice. Because the thing is, at least for me, judge may not be the word that I would use, but I take stock of the people who say things when it's convenient and advocate when it's convenient, and the people that do it when it's really tough. Yeah. And what I try to be intentional about is doing it when there's nothing in it for me. Because I think that's more meaningful, and that's when people need you most. Because I point to 2020 all the time. 2020, black squares, corporations saying, we with y'all, how can we be better allies, this and that. 2022?
Yeah, where are you?
Where y'all at?
Yeah.
I don't hear nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Those campaigns ain't happening because it's harder now. Because now it's blowback. Yeah. So it's like if you can't stand in the paint when it's a tornado, I don't know if you can be a soldier with me. Yeah. So Joy, as you mentioned, it was very difficult for your family to come to grips with your decision to pursue acting. So as you were developing your craft and developing your gift and obviously getting more well-known, did that support change?
A little bit of the support has changed with respect to my career, but it's always with well, you should just do this. Or find something that's gonna be biblically based. And it's like, well, do you only watch biblically based movies? Do they kiss in the movies you watch? You know, it seems like they were putting a mandate on me that they would never put on anybody else. And so I think that the support has changed in recognizing, oh, she does have a gift to do this, and we support this, but we just want to support the projects that we want to support. But I got to a point, you know, as you've told me, Joy, as you get older, you're going to find a freedom and realize this is not, I cannot live my life according to how you guys feel and what you think you should support and not support. You have to live it according to what God has given you to do. And I found that trying to please people, you're never going to please them all. So stop pleasing them and just please God. Please God with the gift that He has given you. Do what you have been called and meant to do. And everybody else, either they'll get on the bandwagon or they won't. And I've learned to recognize that they grew up a certain way. You know, people, the older generation grew up a different way, and they have different things that mean something to them. And so trying to acknowledge that and recognize this is just what's sort of been put into them, and try to see it as, I know they love me. And if I can see it as that, I can just hear their perspective, even though they don't think it's a perspective. They think it's fact.
Right.
But hear it as their perspective, recognize that it comes from a place of love, and continue to move in a way that I feel like God has given me to move. So that's, you know, support has changed. Just, it's not where I would like it to be, but also I'm not where I was. And so I see it differently. I receive it differently.
So the support maybe hasn't changed, but you've changed.
That's
Right.
it.
That's okay.
That's it.
All right.
I've changed. I don't let things sit in my spirit the way they used to. I've learned how to guard my spirit in that way and understand, okay, I know what this, you love me. You just don't know how to say things. And you don't know how to understand that this is just really your perspective and not a fact and not what God is saying. And so we talk about, especially growing up in church, it's like, know God for yourself. But then when we challenge that, people are like, no, this is what God said. No, maybe that's what God told you. But I have learned who God is for myself. And so being able to stand strong in that and understand what God has for me in my life. And so, yeah, I've changed. I've let things roll off a little easier, and I've just grown more into who I'm meant to be.
So yeah, back in the day, this pastor tried to kick it with me.
Not back in the day. This pastor
back in the day.
tried to kick it.
He did.
Yes.
He tried to throw some games.
What was the pastor's game?
You know that pastor church game. He was like, the Lord led me to you. And I was like, this is why I'm telling this story, because what you said reminded me of this. He was like, you know, the Lord led me to you. He just put it on my heart that we're supposed to be together. And I was like, but was I in on the conversation? Was I there? Okay, because that might have been just you and God kicking it. Yeah. And which God? Because I'm like, God didn't let me know the same thing.
I need a confirmation.
I need a confirmation. So when you said that, I was like, oh yeah. That reminded me when that pastor tried to kick it with me. And then nothing ever came. I was nobody's first lady, trust me. But now with the success of Greenleaf and how it exploded, how did your family look at your role on that series?
So I learned that they were not super excited.
In fairness, Charity was crazy. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, you know, Charity had some moments. I think their biggest deal, along with a few others I've learned over the years, I think that people thought, oh, they're doing a series on church and they're just trying to make the church look bad. And that was never the intention. But what did come of it were conversations, real conversations that needed to be had. And so they were not enthused just reading the summary, because that's what they did. I found out. They just read the summary of what Greenleaf was going to be like, and they were like, oh, Lord.
Never watch the show?
So in the beginning, no.
Okay.
It was just the summary and like, ooh, this is the devil. But then my Uncle BB watched, and he even helped do some of the music, and he was very proud of me. And the thing that I've always held on to, going back to that conversation with my granddad while he was still here, when I said I wanted to do theater, and he said Broadway was the way to hell, the way to God is narrow. That's what the Bible says. I remember my grandmother saying, you can do anything. Keep your standards, and God will bless you. Now, I don't think she was very fond of Greenleaf, but I've always held on to keep your standards. And to me, that just meant understand who you are and what your boundaries are and what you're supposed to be doing. And I think of that not just in front of the camera, but it's a way of life. It's wherever I go, whatever set I'm on, whatever I'm doing. It's not just the work in front of the screen. It's treating everybody right. It's my hair and makeup. It's, the PA saying, do you mind praying with me? It's being able to be who I'm supposed to be wherever I am, regardless of what's going on. And so Greenleaf, maybe they didn't love, but I know that I can point to a lot of moments where I know I was meant to be there, and I know that God has used me and been able to pull people and draw people to Him and start conversations. And so, yeah, they didn't love the Greenleaf.
Well, what you said reminded me of my favorite piece of advice to give to younger folks in particular, which is know who you are before you come through the door. Regardless of, like for you it's a set, for me it's any company I work with. If you don't know who you are before you come through that door, whatever happens in that place will change you. And you don't want the place and the environment to be the thing that starts to influence how you act, how you treat other people. Because I'm sure you know plenty of people in your profession who maybe you met earlier in your career or at a time where y'all were both grinding. And you see them years later and you're like, I'm sorry, they acting brand new. You're like, excuse me, sir. Yeah. I remember when you were asking me for half of my ramen noodles. Right. And now you try to be like, I don't know who you are, right? And that is because you can tell they allowed a place and a position, more money to change them. I'm of the firm believer, like, money doesn't make you, it makes you more of what you are. And so if you're the type of person that has that in you, whether you get bumped up from making $7.30 an hour to $12.50, like that extra money is going to make you, it's going to change you. Your experience with not wondering how your family would react, but just some of the mixed emotions you had, or not you had, but your family had in watching you on Greenleaf is something that I went through with my memoir, with Uphill, because this is the story of my life. It involved people that are real people in their lives, and I was very concerned initially about like, okay, if I write the truth and really what happened, and not only that, my perspective, like how will this be received? The most important person that I was concerned about was my mother, because my mother's a recovering addict. She's gone through a lot. She's also a survivor of rape and sexual abuse, and her experiences very much impacted and shaped my own. And so I can't tell my story without telling her story. And so we went through a series of conversations. She was fine with it. She felt like, considering everything that had happened, the least she owed me was the right to tell my story the way it needed to be told. But not everybody was happy with it. Right now, me and my father are not on good terms. He did not like what was put in the book. Really? Yes, he didn't. But his issue wasn't what was put in it. His issue was that he wasn't in it enough.
Really?
We're going to have some church today. That was his issue. And
so understanding how vulnerable you wanted and needed to be for this memoir to be real and sincere, what pushed you to just go ahead and do it regardless of the blowback? Well,
because memoirs usually don't have sequels. So if you're going to, and as a career journalist, the one expectation I have, you don't always get it, often you are disappointed, is that when I sit down with somebody, I want them to be transparent with me. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys have read memoirs by public figures and celebrities, and I feel like they told the truth right there. Or I feel like they were pulling back a little bit. Yeah. I didn't want people to feel like I was being dishonest with them. The one thing I never want to do with any audience, I don't want to be dishonest with you, and I don't want to treat you like you're stupid. Yeah. And so I wrote with that spirit of wanting to do that. And if people were going to be mad, they were just going to have to be mad. And as far as my father's concerned, his issue was that he wasn't in it enough. My comeback to him, which I'm sure he didn't like, was to be in it more, you had to be in my life more. Those two had to come together. It's a reason. Yeah. And if I wanted to air you out, bro, I could have aired you out. Worse, if that was my intention, but it wasn't. It's like, you are a part of my story for sure. Yeah. Our relationship has come a long way, but it was the audacity for me, So nevertheless, and especially because he took those concerns to Facebook first. See, it would be one thing if we had that conversation in private. We didn't have it in private. He had it publicly first. And so by the time we did have it in private, it was a different kind of conversation than it could have been beforehand. And so I say all that to say is that, when you write something like a memoir, especially if it involves real people, what I tried to not do is I wasn't going to tell someone else's story that didn't necessarily want it told. Yeah. Your parents are your parents, so there's nothing you can do about that, so that has to be told. But I revealed in my memoir, something very private, the fact that I had an abortion. And the person who I was with at the time, I don't know what he told his family. Yeah. And to me, it would have felt unfair to say who he was. So he's the only person in the memoir whose name is changed. Yeah. And that was because, I don't know what you told your family. I don't know if you ever told them. Yeah. I don't know if you're married right now, what your situation is. And so I feel like, even though we haven't spoken in years, out of respect, I'll allow you to share that in the way, if you never share it. Yeah. So, sometimes I think part of having a voice and developing a voice, it comes with a responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you were writing a memoir and even being in a space that has always, or for the most part, been the majority male, loud male, thinking they know everything.
What? Not men. They would never. They would never do that.
They take up so much space, particularly in the field that you started in. How did you, as a little black girl from Detroit, how did you find your way and take up all the space that you needed? Because that's very audacious.
So I think you will identify with this, is that sometimes God prepares you for stuff that you don't know he's preparing you for, and all the time. So I look at my life, and really anybody's life, everything happens for a reason. There's a reason I was born in Detroit. There's a reason I was raised by a single mother. And as painful and awful as it was to see her go through a drug addiction, there's a reason I witnessed that. Yeah. There's a reason my father is a recovering addict. I was born to these particular parents for a reason. Yes. And one of those reasons, I think, is that when you grow up and face those kind of challenges, and then just, to be honest, growing up in the hood and, always being the neighborhood tomboy, you learn how to handle yourself. Yeah. And so when it got to the point where I was regularly on TV, or just in those spaces, not even on TV, but in those spaces of going into locker rooms, because my first professional year as a sports reporter, it was 1997. So I'm in my 20s, I'm going into locker rooms. Usually I'm either the only woman in there, the only black person in there, the only black woman in there, combination of those three, or all of those three at the same time. So yes, it can be quite intimidating to go into a locker room where all the men are naked, and your job is to go in there and ask them questions about, so why did you score 30 points? Or I know some of you are like, wait, what? Yes, we interview them naked. It happens a lot. I know, it's not the most, there are a ton of male reporters in there as well. It's not the most comfortable environment. It's a little awkward. But as one of my early mentors told me, another woman, she was like, oh, you're going to your first locker room? This is what you want to do. It was a notepad, so you don't look down. She was like, hold your notepad here. I was like, oh, you funny. I was like, oh, you're funny. But it was good advice. But anyway, So because I was always, the neighborhood tomboy and be in those tough environments, I sort of, you try to roast me, I'm gonna roast you right back. Like it's what it is. So I think coming up that way prepared me to be in those spaces that can be really isolating. Like people think it's some treat to be the only. Like even when you break a barrier, it's tough. Like at one point, I got my first column when I was 28, my first sports column. I was at the Orlando Sentinel. I was the only black female sports columnist at a daily newspaper in North America. Notice I did not just say America. Yeah. I was the only one out of 405, the only one out of 405 daily newspapers. People think that's a great statistic that I'm proud of. I am not. That's not only embarrassing and an indictment of the profession that I became a part of, it also is very isolating. I mean, we've all been in those spaces where you've been the only one, you're the only one in the room, and it's like, that's not an honor, right? And so I had to overcome not just people, just because I'm black and a woman, thinking I somehow conned my way into this space, but also dealing with the fact that I would be the only one. I was the only one that could relate to the experience I was going through because I was the only one I could talk to, right? Yeah. And I think, being the only girl on the block that could, play baseball or softball, like all those little experiences, it amounted to me being able to hold myself together, in those moments.
Yeah. I mean, that's lonely. And I think it's crazy to feel like, oh, you'll never be lonely in life if you're, doing things with other people or going after your dreams. There are so many lonely points. What was there a certain thing that helped you push past feeling isolated and lonely?
Yeah, I mean, I think I leaned on the fact that I was doing good work. That's what I leaned on. I mean, I'm sure you went through when you trained in Russia.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how lonely was that?
Yeah, very, very, very.
Right?
They were like, if I saw somebody black, I was waving from far away, like, huh? How you doing? Yeah, it's leaning on the fact that you're doing what you're supposed to do is really strong. I've certainly had moments where I'm like, yeah, I'm here and this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but my God. There are times, very few, but there are times where I have felt like, even God, where are you? Where are you in this? And that is difficult. I think for me, I've never really had a remedy in those moments other than I don't have the option to give up. I just don't, that's just not an option. I don't know if that's...
No, it's very, because like, listen, I can't do math. I believe in science, not good at it, right? So there was only one career dream I had, was to do this. Yeah. That was it. And that's just being a sports journalist overall. So there was, like you said, there was no other option. Yeah. I mean, I was just going to be writing for, my own personal newspaper in a notebook if it didn't work out. That's it. And I guess you just would have been acting in Times Square, like next to the dudes with the buckets. Right?
That's it. That's it. And I think that's really powerful in and of itself. Like for me, at the end of the day, trusting, like what would you tell yourself 20 years ago? Just knowing.
All right,
the
now,
things
Deborah
that you
Joy,
will
you
go
know I'm
through.
1,000 years old, so at 500, I don't know what I would tell okay. But maybe in my 20s, right?
Yeah, in your 20s.
In my 20s.
In your 20s, what would you say to that girl?
Not worth it to ruin your credit over a free T-shirt. Really not worth it. Y'all know what I'm talking about. College campuses, they like, here, sign up for Discover for this T-shirt that costs $2.50 to make.
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Say
Don't
no.
do it.
The devil
Say
is
no.
a lie. That would be one.
No, yes.
Woo. Please leave Terry alone. Don't let Terry. I'm just kidding.
Hey,
So
now,
men folk, I'm like, oh, girl, no. What are you doing?
Yes. Yes.
But you know what? If beyond the credit thing, but that's real. I would have a conversation with myself about financial literacy, like
Yes.
100%.
Absolutely.
Because I was doing the dumbest of things, like
Absolutely.
paying an additional 20% interest on a $3.50 pizza. Why? So on top of that, what I realized, and I heard this somewhere else, I'm not taking credit for it. It's not that our dreams are too big, they're often too small. And I realized, looking back on it, my dream was to just make $50,000 a year.
Wow.
I was like, oh, if I make 50, I'm in there. Because 50 for some reason was like the magic standard. I don't know why. So, I didn't dream big enough, actually. Because by the time I was in my mid-20s and had accomplished all that, I was like, what's next?
Yeah.
I didn't know what to go to next.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, oh, they were too small. I would have studied abroad, for example. I would have just taken more risk. Because sometimes I think as a young person, you're crippled by the fear that you're making a bad decision. And I don't believe in bad decisions. I believe, again, not only does everything happen for a reason, but even the seemingly bad decisions lead you to a better place.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it really that bad if it led me here?
Yeah.
It's a line I like to use on my husband all the time. I was like, I would go through all the fools if I knew it brought me to you.
Yeah.
Y'all can have that one. Y'all can have that one. Y'all can have that one.
That's free. That's free.
That's free. That's free. Y'all can use that too. I was like, yes, I would go through all of that if that was the case. But I think I would have just learned to take more chances. That's what I would have told myself. Like, all those things you think are chances, no.
Yeah.
That's your dream 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
That's where you want to go? Nope.
Yeah.
Like, go bigger, go bigger, go
Yeah.
bigger. So that would be my biggest advice. What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
That I was enough. That, your dreams, your desires, they are good. And not to, I'm learning things about my mom, who is about to be 70, that she did in her 20s that I didn't even know, because when she came to the Lord, it's like they shredded so many wonderful things about her because it just wasn't to their standard of what a godly woman was. I'm learning she was this activist at MSU, and she was rocking a fro, and she was a vegetarian, and she was just fighting the power and just and into music, and she played the piano like nobody else. There were so many things that I'm learning about my mom now that I never saw growing up. I'm about to be 40 this year, and I'm like, well, why did you stop? Well, when I joined the church, that I couldn't do this, and they said that this. I'm just like, they're taking away the things that God has given you that are so beautiful. And so I would tell myself, in my 20s, that everything about you is just love it. Love it. And learn the things that you don't like. And if you don't like this about yourself, if you don't like your attitude, if you don't like the way you respond to certain things, then you zero in on that and work on that. But don't let anybody else tell you that you're not enough, and that you're not perfect the way God has made you. I think that was the biggest struggle for me. And if I had the confidence of who I am then, baby, I don't know where I would be now. But, I think everything, like you said, happens for a reason. And we are where we are right now because we're supposed to be here. But I would definitely tell younger women, love you. Be grateful for everything that you have, and just continue to develop it.
Well, that's a word, and I think we're going to end it right there.
Well,
Thank you all for being such an active.
Thank you.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Wait, not yet.
Can we,
Okay, hold your
Can
applause.
we take 2 questions?
oh yes.
Can
There
we
are
do
questions.
that? And while y'all are thinking, I'm gonna come over to Blue with this microphone. I just want to say, you were talking about women in their 20s, but I think some of us need that message right now.
That's true.
We are exactly where we are for a reason. I'm gonna turn it over to Blue.
I'll make this quick. Sorry, I have laryngitis from wine country.
I overstand.
I love how you guys talked about self-advocacy, because Black women are often taught that we're difficult when we advocate for self. And I was thinking to myself how the society weaponizes that and makes us feel marginalized and too big while quietly relying on our grace. Because they know that you can call me a bee and a trick and a hoe and all these other words, excuse me, for the church folks. But like, if there's an election or a movement, we're the first ones at the ballots, we're the first ones marching, we're the first ones showing grace, even though we're told Broadway is the pathway to hell. I'm gonna use that line too. My question is, how do you stop yourself from overextending grace? Because I think a lot of us have made sacrifice a defining characteristic. Like the grace that we show to our men,
That
our
is
children, everything else.
Ooh, that's good. That's real good.
That is very good.
I'm asking for myself.
You know, you know, I think for me, I think maybe the first time I really realized that I don't care what y'all think in this moment was being pregnant and being in the hospital. I had to get a cerclage because my baby was trying to come early. My whole pregnancy was just, Lord Jesus. That was, and my friend walked with me through it. My God. It was very difficult. But when I was in the hospital, I had to get a cerclage. And they started giving me this medicine. I asked everything because I'd heard so many horror stories about black women not getting the treatment that they needed and deserved. And so I told my husband before every hospital visit, make sure you're on it. Make sure you're listening to what they're giving me because I don't want nothing that I'm not supposed to have. And I was there during the night, and the nurse came in to tell me to take something. I said, no. They stopped that at the last time that they were giving me medicine. I'm not supposed to have that anymore. No, you're supposed to have it. I said, no, I'm not. And it was like 3 a.m. She said, well, ma'am, I said, you need to go check the charts, and you need to call my doctor. I'm not taking that. She left and then came back about 10 minutes later. Yeah, you're right. It's somehow they just didn't have it on the. No. Somehow you think because I'm a black patient, you don't have to care as much. And let me tell you something, honey. You gonna care or you're gonna get kicked out. You're not dealing with someone that does not know and understand. I don't have grace for that. This is my life. This is my son's life. I don't have grace. And after that moment, I realized I don't have to have grace for anybody who want to be foolish, who wants to not be excellent at their job. If you expect me to come and be excellent at anything I'm doing, you're going to be excellent too, and I'm going to call that out.
Amen and amen. Well, I mean, the only thing I would add to that incredible story is that, a good friend of mine who's an activist, she was in a romantic relationship that she said this one line, and I was like, girl, if I'm going to use this for everything, you just don't know. She said, because this person was not treating her well, and she was like, you do realize if I say what's really in my heart, you'll never recover. And I was like, ma'am. I was like, you said that? She was like, I told him that. And she was like, he backed all the way off. And so I was like, I'm adopting that not just as a line, but as a lifestyle. Like, you do realize I could end you right now. And it's only because the Lord working in my heart that I have not destroyed you on sight. So sometimes I think, as DJ said, you just have to let people know. Because understand that those people that have those perceptions about black women of being angry, aggressive, you being graceful is not going to change that. Yeah. So you might as well sit in your truth and check a fool when necessary. Yeah. Because they don't have any problem checking you when necessary. They don't have any problem disrespecting you. So I can only give the grace that I receive. And if I'm not receiving that, I don't feel the need to give it to you. And in some situations, like you just alluded to, people don't deserve that because there should be a higher standard. You know, there's compassion, of course, but I think one thing black women are guilty of, and it's a conditional guilt, it's one we've been all groomed with, is that we are tasked with the responsibility of carrying the weight of the world, right? We got to save Wakanda, our families, the entire race of women, the democracy. I'm like, why can we breathe? Like, why? Why I got to save all that? You know what I'm gonna save? I'm gonna save this mimosa. That's what I'm gonna save. Other than that, the answer is no.
All right. Oh. All right, Miss Destiny.
This question is specifically for Miss Jemele. I love you. So, as a woman that is like extremely outspoken as you are, another stigma that is put on women like us is that we won't find a partner that will understand and uplift that aspect of us and everything that we
Already
are.
my favorite question.
Right. So, like, I feel like you know where I'm going with this question, but how?
Exactly where you're going with it.
How was that process like for you? Because that is something that is put on us a lot. Yeah.
It is. I mean, the stigma is that we have to minimize ourselves in order to be a suitable partner for somebody else. And one of the reasons I'm glad I got married when I did, I got married, God, how old am I now? Okay, let me think. Let me do the math. Carry the one minus, okay. All right. I think I was 43 when I got married. Okay, I'm 47 now. So, because we're in year 4, that makes sense. Boom, got it. 2019. So one of the reasons I am glad I got married when I did is because I wanted other black women to see that we don't have an expiration date, because they put that on us too. They say like, oh, when you're in college, you should have been, you know, like some of the white girls were looking for a MRS instead of a degree, right? And I just didn't think that needed to be my story. And I was comfortable so much in who I was that, to what DJ said earlier, you have to really deeply believe, even if sometimes you have self-doubt, you have to believe you are enough, and that somebody that you really want to be with is going to see that. And I've always advocated for black women to, frankly, date like men, you know, to go out and just enjoy being on a date, or enjoy just the freeness of like, oh, I'm just getting to know you. It doesn't have to be X, Y, Z, because I do think that's a way that you find yourself and that person. But you have to go into it with that intrinsic belief that what I have to offer, my opinions, my strength, is exactly what somebody else wants to be with. And the thing that men, not all men, they don't always understand is that we don't actually, we will always do what's required of us from a community standpoint, a family standpoint, but we don't wake up like, how can I figure out how to save the world? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, we are happy to give someone else part of the leadership mantle if we feel like they deserve it. I am very happy to let my husband lead. I do not want to make 7,000 decisions all by myself. Like, no. So I think they see how we operate in business and how we handle ourselves, and they assume that that's how we want to handle our relationship. And I'm like, those are two different areas, right? Like, you know, I don't want to play Sports Center at home. So it's like, it's fine, right? So I would say that don't minimize yourself for the comfort of somebody else, because that's just going to make you feel bad. You know, because if you feel like, oh, I'm holding back because I want this person to like me and I want them to be with me, at some point that's going to run out. And the real you is going to come clawing out, okay? And if they're not ready for that, and if they aren't worthy of that, it's going to create, you know, a disastrous sort of connection. So, yeah. Yes, don't worry about it. We ain't have an expiration date. You get married at 60. Who cares? It don't matter. So you good, sis.
I agree with that 100%. 100%. And also, it's a slap in the face of God to minimize everything that He has called for you to be.
Ooh. You better bring that word.
Don't ever minimize.
She said what I wanted to say, but smarter and more biblical.
Absolutely not. No. You need all of it, but do not minimize. Because who God has called you to be is what you are supposed to be. If you have to minimize for somebody else, they're not meant to be in your life.
And a dude that wants you to be that way is kind of a weak-ass dude. That's just my personal opinion. Yes. Absolutely. Anywho, and on that note, now we will call it to a close. We got a love offering on the tide, so Y'all are good. But thank you, ladies, for your attention and your questions.